This is Hidden Killers Week in Review.
A look back at the most prolific stories of the week. This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Brueski.
Featuring retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer.
We recently had a chance to take a look into the thinking of Shana Gardner and Mario Saldana, of course, both of them being charged with the ambush shooting of Jared Bridegan in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, several years ago. Of course, Jared Bridegan, the ex-husband of Shana Gardner. Interesting to take a look at their accounts of their initial police interviews right after their arrest and their charges in those crimes. Joining me to discuss this, Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. Between Shana and between Mario, there's two different accounts here of what was going on within the family, a lot of it talking about the relationship, the parenting arrangements, the stress, the disagreements. If one is to believe all of what was read, and I don't, but if you're just to base everything off of this, it does look like all at play here, including Jared, not everybody playing along super great for the welfare of the children. Seems to be a lot of drama going on within the confines of all of this. And I'm sure family members beyond just Shana and Jared were aware of the stress that was going on. Let's just start with that, Jennifer. What was your takeaways when you had a chance to take a look at those accounts from both of the parties?
Well, my number one takeaway from Shana's was I think there's a very thin line between love and hate. Mm-hmm. And I think she actually, hated him because she loved him and the situation went so south. In other words, it seemed to me that she was just so scorned and so angry, and that is what caused this problem. I also find it interesting that, of course, she's able to say all of these things because he's dead and can't protect himself and can't defend himself from, a lot of her allegations. But if you really look down to her allegations, she doesn't say she was hit or beat or that he was a bad person per se. And I don't know. I gleaned a lot from that in terms of somebody who very, very much, I think, probably loved him and was, ended up having to get this divorce, which I don't think was something she wanted. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, at the very heart of this, I know it all came down to the ugliness of this battle for the children and for custody. The other thing that came through very clearly was she feels like financially and monetarily, she was the reason that the family was doing well and that he bled those funds dry and that she was angry about that. So she just seems so scorned and bitter.
Sure. And obviously no reason to ever kill somebody. If the allegations are true, it was a bit of a scornful breakup. And it does make you wonder a bit about the money and things of that nature as far as how that was all handled and what the initial motives were. If she talks about how they met, really first date didn't go that great, but within a few weeks they were engaged and then married after a handful of months. That I find very bizarre, especially if you found it not to be the greatest of ideas. At some point she clearly did. To go down that road. But yeah, very, very much scorned. I mean, you can just as a human, if you take murder out of it and you go, well, if that's the dynamics, gosh, that doesn't sound like a good situation. Again, everybody's painting their picture the best that they can. That's how people are going to be. Another thing I found interesting in it was Mario's account that differed from Shana's account. Shana didn't immediately come to the surface with, well, here's who I think, may have done this or even point the finger in any direction. Mario did. Mario very quickly pointed out, well, Jared's got a lot of enemies. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Did you read that as any sort of sign of guilt? Or is it more so this is a guy that's in a new relationship and his new wife, has a fairly toxic ex-husband that is not the greatest with a lot of people. And maybe there's more people out there than just these two that would have a beef with him in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I took both of their statements as being very self-serving, but them choosing different routes.
Yeah.
Right. Her route was feel sorry for me. We didn't have this great relationship. Look at everything that was happening. So she just wants to somehow paintbrush herself as a a victim almost in this.
Mm-hmm.
And then he wants to provide a more logical explanation. He wants to give police something to work with. Listen, and to provide them sort of this detour of, oh, he has a lot of enemies. That makes sense. So I see hers is kind of more of an emotional, feel sorry for me, type of a situation. And then his was logical.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and that's interesting with his logic. But does being logical mean guilty? I mean, I know there's a hitman here who's out there saying these two are the ones who hired me. But does being logical about this mean guilt? If you're in that situation and you know this about a person, that the person has a lot of enemies, and again, I don't know if he does or not. I'm just basing it, for devil's advocate purpose on the documents we're talking about. But I could easily, I think I could see myself if I'm like completely innocent in a situation and somebody's like, oh my God, somebody got murdered. Like, well, there's these problems I've seen or heard about with others. You might want to take a look over there, not in a let's deflect blame or something, but in a here's what I know sort of way, especially if you have nothing to hide.
Yeah. So the problem with that is the evidence against him is not going to back any of that
problem,
up.
yes.
And the evidence against this is such a strong case. So that's a big problem for him. But secondarily, how would a guy that's married your ex-wife that you don't even want anything to do with, you don't go to school meetings with them, you don't go to doctor's appointments, you avoid them at all costs, what intersection would he have even had with the victim to know who his enemies are? So on the face of it, I find it ridiculous that he would have this insight as to his list of enemies. I think it was a complete diversion. And I think when this goes to trial, if it goes to trial, this is going to be hours long deliberation. That's it. It won't even make a day.
The only other thing I can think of here, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate on this one because I think it's important to look at both sides of this and just kind of weed some of this stuff out. We have the Adelsons. That's a totally different case, totally different family. You got Charlie Adelson, you got Donna Adelson, you got all that, where the end of the day, it's starting to look like, oh, there was somebody higher up than even just the kids here that were doing their stuff that maybe, and again, I am just as pure speculation. I have no idea what's going on with any of these families, but I do wonder, is that worth taking a look at of did somebody else in this family, maybe on Shana's side or something that, did not like the environment that was going on with the kids and decided to kind of be vigilante and, well, I know my kids won't do this, so I'm going to do it for them, and they're not going to have any knowledge, and it just goes completely haywire because they didn't see the trees through the forest of, oh, this is going to look really horrible on the kids. I don't know. Just a scenario I'm throwing out there of could there be somebody else behind that hitman other than these two?
Well, I think if there were, the hitman would have named them.
Yeah.
And the hitman is very specific, and it's backed up with corroborating evidence in terms of phone records and messaging.
True.
And exchanges. And because of that, I think it's just a direct point at these two. It makes sense. Mm-hmm. They had the motive. I agree with you, though, sometimes extended family members get into play, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence in support of that on this case.
Oh, that pesky evidence, that pesky evidence.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free,
so you can binge on true crime
until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.